Chapter 2. The One Mind. 1. We have evidence of the control of the one mind. In every field of action we will note the one mind control. Even upon this boat you will note that there is one head. Consequently, there is one control, with many activities under that control, and all these lesser activities emanate from that centralized authority. 2. It is only through this centralization of power and authority that there is anything like harmony in the operations of any organized section of society, or even within the individual. We all know what happens when there is a division of power, or rather an attempt to divide authority without consideration of some central motivating source. The orders which go forth from two sources to the various centers of activity can result only in confusion and chaos. If power emanates from more than one central directive head, the authority is destroyed and the entire structure is broken down. 3. Where there is one controlling element which has dominion, power, or control of motivating action, we are brought directly to that one element and thereby brought to one pointed action, which we have discussed many times. It is through that action that we do accomplish, and that action brings us into a harmony with that central control, in that we do not scatter our forces, but work with the one force, or power, which is complete control. 4. You always bring yourself into accord with that to which you have delegated power. That is, if you believe in the power of the world and its environment, you are seemingly receiving directive control from 1,000 different sources, and this is the source of your confusion. You do not know whether to obey the seeming demands made here, there, or some other place, and this division in the consciousness breaks down the entire structure of man's nature. He must know whom we have believed, and become persuaded that he is able to keep that which we have committed unto him against that day. 5. That one control does exist for every human being if he will but use it. Of course, the use of that control must be conscious. It must be consciously directed or used for the purpose which we decree or which we establish. It is through the establishment of that control that our thoughts are brought into that one power of action or one thought of expression. There they cannot help but express that which they send forth. In other words, the motivating principle we determine must come into existence. His servants are ye, to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey. And the manifest results must be determined by the outworking of that motivating force from which you receive your direction. The results can be no greater than is the power vested in the authority. 6. This central control of the universe is often called principle as well as mind. Principle does not bind it as closely, perhaps, as the one mind. Still, that principle controls and governs, and it knows what it is doing, it governs with intelligence, so it must be a mind principle. The Hindu always puts it as principle, or the Almighty, which means that man does become that mighty, controlling element. Man stands in all his mightiness the moment he projects his thought to that one control, that one central directive authority. 7. It is all so simple if one looks at the entire situation with an open-minded and sane approach to it. You say in your own mind that this person or that condition has power to make you sad. This is delegating authority to a definite location or form. Obeying the authority which you have thus assigned, you embody in yourself the mental and emotional state which you recognized as existing in the nature of that authority. You could not possibly think of embodying joy from a source that you decree has only the power to make you sad. Then, through your obedience to the authority, you embody the sadness which you have admitted it has the power to manifest in you, and you say, "I am sad." You become that which you embody. This is the whole secret power, but to manifest that mighty power that is ours, we must obey that source and embody the characteristics which it possesses. Then we should not hesitate to proclaim, "I am that," as the Hindus put it, when that becomes the thing we have embodied. This will all become perfectly clear to anyone who will dwell on the matter for a time. 8. In this state, willpower is not a method of control. Willpower gives us the impetus for bringing that control into existence, but it is not the motivating factor back of the control. Will may differ entirely from control. Self-will never is able to project thoughts to one central point. Definite control or mind action is capable of carrying thoughts, feelings, or actions to one central control, which is a definite attribute or element that man uses always, and which he has dominion to work with, not over, but to work with. That is the very force which man brings into activity the moment he brings his thought to that focal point of principle which activates all conditions. 9. Let us take a very simple illustration. Man has power to bring his mind into subjection to the principle of mathematics, but he does not have the will to make the principle act. The principle acts of itself and is a single center of control within its sphere. Man may bring his will up to the point of the activity of the principle, but from then on the principle is the motivating force, and through this subjection of his will, to be more accurate, he finds the secret of his mathematical power. The principle of the human will is that it is to be brought into subjectivity to some higher authority, and thus man becomes the embodiment of it, and is possessed of the power of this higher authority. Man's weakness is brought about through making himself subject to that which in reality has no power, and this should be proof to him of the immense power which is possible to him. He must now learn to apply this principle of his own will and recognize power as existing only in the one principle. 10. Our everyday life is a concrete application of this fact in that our statements conform to the one principle or one mind. We vision or project an ideal. Let us say that that ideal is for perfection. We immediately come into direct accord with the one mind control or principle. We project an ideal for ourselves to accomplish. If it is a high ideal, that power immediately becomes active and brings that ideal into existence. The moment that ideal is projected and the force back of it becomes active through it, that ideal is complete. That is, the moment the ideal is released from the activity of our will and is projected into the activity of the one principle, it is a completed thing. So long as there is any dual sense, it is difficult for anyone to see how this can be true on the manifest plane. The masters do not take into consideration any plane outside of the spiritual made manifest. If we do not take into consideration any plane outside of the spiritual, it must be in existence always after the statement is made, even before the statement is made. We quite evidently withhold from ourselves the accomplishment of our ideal because we look to 3 planes upon which it may manifest. It is found very conclusively today that it manifests only on one plane. It manifests on the spiritual plane always. It is always fact. 12. Now, if we hold to and remain within that spiritual plane, we would see it in its true expression. We would not need to look to the material at all, for when we do, we speak in terms of materializations, and materialization is not spiritually a fact. The actual thing is the fact always. That is the spiritual made manifest. 2 plus 2 equals 4 in the mathematical principle. It equals 4 in the mind, and likewise in manifestation. This is not 3 planes, but it is all the mathematical fact separated or differentiated at no point whatever. 13. After the manifestation, it is said that it does no harm to name it material or physical, because you cannot harm the fact. But it is always elevated or exalted to the spiritual. That was Jesus' meaning when he said, "If ye exalt all things to spirit, they are in existence already." Evidently, he had that very thing in mind when he gave the prayer, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me, and that you do hear me always." He knew fully that which he saw as his ideal was already accomplished. To him it came forth instantly. Then he gave the statement that if you go forth into the vineyard, it is ready for harvest. 14. Now, if we take that definite position, there is no question but that we would be out of all of this difficulty completely. He immediately rose above every difficulty by the very attitude that he took. It was not a long, arduous process to him. It was instantaneous. He saw completely through the non-existence of them. That is not claiming that he denied them. It is quite evident that he never denied any condition. He always rose above it to the true spiritual condition, and then there was no need for denial or for paying any attention to anything but the true spiritual condition. He said, "I live always in spirit." 15. Our Bible says, "I live always in a spirit," being an entirely wrong interpretation. The interpolation of "a," where it does not belong, makes a lot of difference. That is where many mistakes were made in our understanding. 16. The Christian Bible says, "God is a spirit." The original was "God is spirit," never confining him to one attribute, to one condition. One writer said, "It is like trying to crowd God into the quart measure of our intellect." Spirit and mind are synonymous. They are one and the same in vibratory influence. That which seems to make a difference is that we take our thoughts as indicating mind. Mind is consciousness, for mind and consciousness are inseparable. The element of consciousness is thought, and when conscious of spiritual fact, there is no difference to us between mind and spirit. We are in a state of spiritual consciousness. 17. You are right in thinking of mind as consciousness in action, but so is spirit consciousness in action. They, too, are synonymous. Either may become quiescent or become submerged in the individual, but they are not submerged in the outer condition. If the outer is like the inner, mind is never submerged in the individual, but is only quiescent. The individual only thinks that it is submerged, and to that person it may become non-existent because he is not conscious of it. The consciousness is always there and springs into existence instantly if one projects consciousness toward that which always is, the spiritual fact. 18. The element of consciousness is the directive rather than the motivating agency of mind. Thus, it is indispensable in the sending forth of the emanations of mind, or, as we put it, in stepping up the emanations of mind to their true state, providing the element of consciousness is true to the spiritual fact. 19. Today, many scientists are approaching this same conclusion regarding the underlying cause of all things. They dissolve the whole structure of substance and resolve it all back to emanating energy identical with spirit. Spirit is all-pervading. It manifests in everything. It is found that all elements, including radium, are reduced to that one primal element, emanating energy. But this energy, in the last analysis, is not blind force, but intelligent force. It knows what it is doing. Scientists even admit that there is a certain form of electricity that seems to know what it is doing. This all-pervading creative energy back of all things is aware of itself, aware of what it is doing, aware of how to do it, and we therefore call it spirit or God. It is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, as the Christian Bible puts it. 20. When man begins to assemble in his consciousness the activities of any principle, he begins to say, I am that. This is the centralizing of the authority of the principle in himself. I am renders the mind dynamic instead of letting it rest in potentiality. It becomes dynamic the moment we focus thought upon I am. That focal point is the central always, and from it emanates the authoritative commands that control and determine the entire status of manifest man. The I am must be used to indicate man's true estate, that which he is in fact, and not what he has seemed to himself to be in manifest form. I am that I am, which is the embodiment of the motivating authority of the universe. Beside that I am, there is no true existence, but only delusion. 21. This name, I am, was God to Moses. It has come down through the ages as I am. To the Hindus, it is Om, which means the same. Likewise, to the Aryans, it is Om. The Chinese use it as Tao. 22. The so-called blind spots in the ether common in our radio and scientific fields is in a sense symbolic of the blind spots in human consciousness. The radio beam crosses right through these non-magnetic fields as if they did not exist. Our layers of atmosphere, the concentric bands of atmospheric conditions, are in motion. In our Earth, they are stationary. When a non-magnetic field moves over a magnetic field of our concentric bands, a vacuum-like condition is established. When a magnetic field passes over a non-magnetic field on the Earth's surface, it passes right through it and is lost. It is frequently more powerful at night than in the daytime. These non-magnetic fields are like the static states in human consciousness, more intense with greater darkness or ignorance. But the positive radiations of the spiritual I am, the declarations of that which man is in fact, penetrate through these static fields of his consciousness, and it is as though they do not exist. The persistent declaration of spiritual fact regarding man's nature and his place in the universe eventually will eliminate all these static fields in human consciousness as well as in his affairs. 23. The one mind is not constantly creating new ideas. It is manifesting ideas that have been created from the beginning. For the one mind is, and always has been, omniscient, all-knowing. It has never been, nor will it ever be, more or less than itself. It is all a process of reverberation. It is the same as our radio currents today. They are flooding back and forth or reverberating from one space to the other space. That is, from space to space, as you might say. 24. Thought is, of course, the most potent of any radiations because it has control over the vibratory field of electricity and radio. In fact, both the vibratory field of electricity and of radio will impinge and reflect upon the vibratory field of thought always. Radio follows a track in the atmosphere regardless of a conductor. It follows a true track or trend. It operates through the ether. But thought, in this sense, does not travel, for thought is omnipresent. It is already there no matter to what point you refer. It is the impingement of thought upon the electrons that causes thought to appear to move. Mind is the motivating element, thought moving concurrently with mind, and in striking upon the electrons produces all movement in the plane of manifest substances. 25. That which we call space is in reality the one spiritual mind. That is the principle by which the human soul, which is the replica of the spiritual mind, can overcome time and space, for there is no such thing as time and space in spirit. In spirit all is complete, and in completeness there can be no such thing as time or space. This is what is meant by letting the same mind be in you, which was also in Christ. It is a state of complete oneness existing in fact between the individual and the universal soul, and it must become a conscious fact to the individual. This is the complete mind, the controlling mind functioning through the individual consciously. 26. Physical man, or man conscious of himself only as a physical being, thinks that he is apart from God, the one mind, and thinks in terms of moving from place to place, is only moving in illusions for himself, and hence unhappiness. He really is in and of that one mind, and lives and moves and has his being in it. In Jesus' talks, his greatest statement was, "Peace, be still." It is never said in a loud voice projected of the will of man, but in unison with the calm, knowing power that comes from a sense of oneness. There is the greatest security and the greatest power. We have seen some of the greatest storms overcome by that simple statement. Likewise, the seeming brainstorms of human mind are stilled until one can feel the controlling power of the one mind. For the teacher. Paragraphs 1 and 2 give ample opportunity to conclusively point out to the individual that so long as his mind is divided, he has, by that active division, lost his sense of power and direction. Only from some definite premise can any structure be builded, and until one has arrived at this premise, he cannot proceed to anything. This must have been what Jesus meant when he said, "Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve." Paragraph 3. This one underlying principle of life, God, is the controlling and ruling force of the universe, and man can find himself only in relationship to this principle. The only adjustment that will harmonize man's being is a realignment of his entire nature with the facts from which he came. Paragraph 4. Man himself has assigned power to the external world, for there is no power there originally, nor is power there even when he has seemed to delegate it. That power still remains within himself, and that which seems to be power in environment or anything outside of his own I am, his central identity, is the perversion of this same power within himself. The power is always within man, and it works according to the direction given it. But back of it all is the controlling force of the universe, and that which I am individually must be one with the I am, which is universal. Perfect accord must exist between cause and effect, for the movement of the cause is the life of the effect. Paragraphs 5, 6, and 7 can be further extended along this same line, and the lesson made of eternal benefit to every individual. Nothing else so completely tallies with the true message which Christ tried to give to the world as this: "Greater things than these shall ye do," was his estimate of man's potential capacity. Paragraphs 8 and 9. The most helpful lesson and liberating practice can be developed from these 2 paragraphs. The willful attempt to force thought into the plane of manifestation is a hopeless task. It is destructive to the individual who practices it. The acceptance of the universal power, a central executive emanation that produced heaven and earth as the already completed manifestation of itself, and the self-existent fact back of every constructive idea of man, is the way to liberation. Paragraph 10 shows the method of procedure in so-called demonstration, which is, in the last analysis, stepping aside from our sense of incompleteness and imperfection to accept the facts. Paragraph 11 shows more accurately what happens in this matter of manifest results. A freeing of the mind from all duality is the solution to the whole matter. Paragraph 12 is a further extension of this same idea. Paragraphs 13, 14, and 15 can be made to strengthen the foregoing. Paragraph 16. Can we not once and for all make clear that the different minds, as we call them, are but a difference in thought? Mind functioning as what we call mind is the same spiritual capacity in man functioning in its lower capacity through perverting it to lesser purposes. When man thinks the thoughts of God after him, His mind is then spiritualized or functioning in its true field with God thoughts, thinking as God thinks, or more accurately, knowing as God knows. The human mind thinks. The God mind knows. Paragraphs 17, 18, and 19 give excellent opportunity to extend this idea further and to drive home the idea that man is not truly living until he consciously functions in harmony with his source. Paragraphs 20 and 21. The true use of the I am is to maintain man's original identity in and with his source, not allowing it to descend to include within his nature that which he is not. Man is not his experiences. He is what he is. Experiences with that which seem less than himself should never be admitted into his estimate of himself. I am always that which I am in spirit, not what I seem to be in experience or what I have experienced in the world. No matter what I have gone through or seem to be going through, I still remain what I am in the original sense, the image and likeness of God. Paragraph 22 shows the far-reaching influence of spiritual fact as transcending all sense of limitation. Spirit takes no account of evil, of loss, lack, poverty, disease. These are but blind spots in human consciousness. To the mind that knows, there are no such things, and it goes right on with that which it knows and is. Paragraph 23. The mind which is God is the same yesterday and forever. That which seems to be a new idea to us is but our discovery of what always was. Healing and so-called demonstrations are not bringing something into being, but are an awakening to the state which has always prevailed in fact. Paragraph 24. Power of thought, so-called, is not the power of thought. Thought is only a conveyor of power. Power is in spirit, and thought conveys or carries power only to the extent that it conforms to the standards and purposes moving in spirit. My words are spirit, said Jesus, meaning that his words accurately conformed to the universal trend which he called the will of God. Paragraphs 25 and 26 present man as an integral part of infinite space and not an isolated being among isolated forms. By one Spirit we are baptized into one body. Finding our calm in this eternal unity of all things is our position of power, where all contrary illusion is dissolved into the peace and tranquility of illumination.